So last week I made a video in which I did some quick reviews for movies that I was really excited about, but didn't have time to dedicate videos to all three of them. I mention this because I'm doing that again, in which I compile a few different short reviews together into one video, because a couple of weeks ago and throughout this past week, I went to the Scottsdale International Film Festival. This was my very first experience at a film festival ever, and it was very special to me in that sense. I mean, there wasn't really that many big vendors or anything like you would expect from a festival that you're used to. Similar to an experience you might have just going to a regular advanced screening or just going to movies altogether. But the difference is that the film festival allows for smaller movies and bigger like tentpole movies, but ones that are more focused on like award season, to get the traction and the attention that they need before they release to general audiences. And so I'm glad I had that opportunity because I saw a few movies there that I'm very excited to share with you more about ahead of their release. And in that, I will be covering 4 different movies in the order in which I saw them. Waves by director Trey Edward Schultz, The Truth by director Hirokazu Kore-eda, Knives Out by director Ryan Johnson, and The Report by director Scott Z. Burns. So there you have it. I'm excited to share my thoughts on all of these because most of these aren't in theaters yet, so I'm happy I have the opportunity now to share with you a little bit about these movies before they release so that you can get an idea as to what you might want to check out this holiday season. With that being said, let's get started. The first movie I saw at the festival was Waves by writer and director Trey Edward Schultz. I have a lot of respect for this filmmaker, given what he's been able to accomplish in the first few years of his career. He's just barely into his 30s and has already released 3 features that have been acclaimed by critics. Personally, It Comes at Night is my favorite movie of his, but Waves is also perfectly satisfying on its own. For better and worse, this movie abandons the traditional 3-act structure in favor of splitting the story into 2 parts. Each part hones in on someone within a well-to-do African-American family at the film's core. Therefore, the tone, editing, and cinematography reflect what's going on inside the characters' heads. Trey Edward Schultz has proven himself to be quite skillful at using visuals to tell a story, and this was further evidence of that innate talent. I found the movie to be very compelling because of this, especially in its first part as we see Kelvin Harrison Jr.'s character navigate the many stresses of his fast-paced life. But I can't deny that the film did lose me for a little bit once the second half began. So much palpable tension had been wound up that when everything came to a head, the pacing very obviously slowed down as the story took a different turn. If the first half is a boiling tea kettle, then the second half is a sleepy old lady barely making it through a cup of said tea. I don't mean to discredit the movie because of this though, for Schultz's ambition ultimately paid off for me. Waves emanates emotional power because of how it explores what can happen when a family endures a horrendous tragedy, and then how they try to move on. Whereas Trey's 2 previous movies left its audience on dour notes, Waves endears one with the plea to be more hopeful and forgiving, of others, and of themselves. Given how well the actors and insightful screenplay make all that work, the flaws are insignificant. With that, I am giving Waves an A-, in addition to an age recommendation of 17 and up. If you'd like to see this movie, it'll release in theaters around Thanksgiving weekend. But now we move on to the second film I saw at the festival, which was The Truth, by writer and director Hirokazu Kore-eda from Japan. Filmmakers trying out something in a different language than their own is always fascinating to behold. We've seen countless Hollywood directors try this, but I think it's even more interesting to witness what lens Asian talents bring to Western culture. Japanese independent filmmaker Hirokazu Kore-eda is the latest person to do this, making the highly unconventional choice to not only make a film outside of his native country, but to set it in France with spoken French and English dialogue. The Truth, then, was a very curious experiment in theory, but I don't think it really paid off. As much as I really hate to admit this as a film fan, I have to be in a mood to enjoy a slower-paced, structurally free indie film that just screams art house. I did my best to work up the enthusiasm for The Truth since I really loved Kore-eda's previous feature Shoplifters, but then I began to realize that this story was doing very little to engage me. The performances were all quite excellent and the cinematography was lovely, yet very little of actual interest seemed to have been taking place. Ultimately, even as it dances around some heavy themes about the relationships that mothers and daughters share with one another, the film really isn't that cohesive of an experience. It's undeniably a competent one, so I can easily see others getting more out of it than I did, but still, when a 105-minute film has about 75 minutes worth of story and feels longer than 2 hours, I am not a happy moviegoer. With that, I'm giving The Truth a C+, in addition to an age recommendation of 15 and up, which isn't because there's anything really inappropriate in the movie at all, it's mainly just because I think anyone under that age would be horrendously bored by it. Also, from what I understand, there is currently no American release of this movie scheduled so far, so I would say you can probably just go ahead and skip this one and forget about it. But hey, that just means we can focus on the really good stuff of now. Since the release of The Last Jedi, legions of Star Wars fans have bigoted Rian Johnson for his creative vision. He may not have made a perfect film, but no genuine artist deserves the hatred that Rian Johnson and some of his actors got for simply trying to be entertaining. By some miracle, though, Johnson managed to move on from the negative feedback and prepare himself for another production. And much to the chagrin of many Star Wars fans, Rian Johnson has produced an extremely entertaining and compelling spin on the whodunit genre. In this, people familiar with the works of Agatha Christie or the Clue movie will be right at home with Knives Out. Rian Johnson takes the conventions of the mystery genre and applies his distinct style to them. What makes the story so distinctive, however, is exactly how he uses those tropes. The twists and turns are deliberate in swinging the audience around, but not just for the sake of thrills. Strong characters and spicy conversations make the experience worthwhile. And I was pleased to see that Johnson told a story in which the murder investigation was not the primary focus. Instead, something of even greater importance propels the story forward. What I will say is that it creates a subtle political undertone to the story that I never could have expected. Knives Out places many different archetypes of American people into a bottled-up setting, only to see what happens when they clash in a witty, hilarious, and incisive battle of ideologies. And the way that these themes wrap up in the final scene of the film was just pure genius. As a film fan, I couldn't have been happier with how this movie turned out. Rian Johnson still hasn't quite mastered the art of sudden humor in his movies, but he pretty much nailed everything else. Knives Out's a wickedly fun time that also manages to be something of artistic and social merit, which is all that I ask for movies to be. With that, Knives Out gets an A, in addition to an age recommendation of 13 and up. For those of you who wanted to see this in theaters as well, there will be some advanced screenings on November 22nd and 23rd, but its full release will be the day before Thanksgiving. But anyway, we now move on to the final movie I saw at the festival, The Report, which honestly wasn't the most exciting way to end off my experience here, but it was still a worthwhile movie. Director Scott Z. Burns has written many screenplays before, but The Report is his first effort with both a camera and pen, in which he dramatized the Senate's investigation into the CIA's post-9/11 interrogation tactics. The resulting movie isn't particularly remarkable, but it's a competent directorial debut nonetheless. No single shot felt as if it was framed incorrectly, and while the film is long, scenes never dragged on longer than they should have. The handling of tone was also very critical here, for The Report is a profoundly dry movie. This was of course intentional, given that the movie does its best to highlight how painstaking and seemingly endless this investigation was. This approach to storytelling works at getting you on the same emotional level as Adam Driver's real-life investigator Daniel J. Jones. He effortlessly inhabits the mental space of someone who just wants to see some accountability. It seems as though bags beneath Driver's eyes continue to grow in size as the story goes on, getting to the point where any audience member wouldn't bat an eye at letting his character rest their shoulders on them and take a nap. But on the other hand, this means that The Report is basically C-SPAN transformed into cinema. If you don't find yourself easily engaged by dull situations and conversations devoid of dramatic energy, this may easily put you to sleep. I have to admit then that despite trying my absolute best to pay attention, I sometimes couldn't keep my eyes from closing. The performances and gradual unveiling of CIA secrets maintained my interest, but the pacing and directing could have used so much more work. However, this is a story worth seeing unfold. Its message is important considering that our tax-funded leaders need to be more competent and trustworthy than ever before. You may find that its dryness will cause problems for your enjoyment, but the eventual payoff is worth the time invested. With that, The Report gets a B, in addition to an age recommendation of 15 and up. If you'd like to see this in theaters, it is in a limited release right now, but if you miss it, then it will be coming to Amazon Prime on November 29th. Thank you so much for watching. As always, guys, I have a lot of reviews planned, and I'm gonna try to do more of these like shorter form voiceover reviews because they're easier for me to make. And honestly, they're shorter and I think they might benefit you more, so I'm going to try to do that more often. And feel free to send me some feedback as to how you think they are compared to me just standing in front of a camera and embarrassing myself. As always, if you like this content, please like and subscribe. It really does help me grow my content here. But in the end, thank you so much for watching as always, and I hope you have a great one.